The war was over. Europe was in ruins, cities shattered, hope barely alive, but rebuilding needed power. Not coal, not smoke, something new, oil, black gold from the Middle East. This was the fuel of recovery. Factories, homes, vehicles, all needed it. But how to get it to Europe? The journey was long, dangerous. Around Africa? Too slow, too costly. There was a shortcut. The Suez Canal. A man-made marvel slicing through Egypt, connecting seas and continents. Through this narrow passage, tankers sailed day and night, carrying precious oil. Western economies depended on it utterly. Without this oil, progress would halt. The dream would die. Suez was key, absolutely key. The canal became the artery of Europe's recovery. Every drop of oil that passed through fueled a new dawn. The world's future was now tied to a single, narrow waterway. The stakes? Immense. Suez wasn't just a canal, it was Europe's lifeline. The world watched, knowing everything depended on this fragile link. Oil flowed, and with it hope. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. The canal's importance grew with every passing tanker. Europe's thirst for oil was insatiable. The Middle East's deserts became the world's treasure vault. Suez was the lock and the key. The post-war order was built on oil, and oil moved through Suez. The future was liquid, black, and utterly essential. The canal's fate would soon shape the fate of nations. For now the oil flowed, but for how long? The world was about to find out. Suez was more than a shortcut, it was the crossroads of power. The Suez Canal. More than water, more than a route. For Britain it was an imperial artery connecting London to its fading empire. Troops, goods, influence, all flowed through Suez. France too had deep roots, their pride, their investment. The Suez Canal Company, Anglo-French owned, collecting tolls, running the show. A narrow strip of water controlling global trade, especially oil. Whoever controlled the canal controlled the flow. Britain and France liked that control. It kept them powerful. Suez was their anchor in a changing world. This canal was a choke point, a bottleneck. Imagine a highway with only one lane open. That lane was Suez. For oil tankers, it was indispensable. The beating heart of oil transport. Britain and France felt its pulse and believed it was theirs to manage forever. But the world was changing. Old empires were fading, new powers rising. Suez was the last stronghold of colonial influence. The canal's control meant relevance, leverage, and profit, but it also meant vulnerability. One narrow waterway holding the fate of nations. The world's oil supply, bottled up in a single passage. The stakes were enormous. Suez was the tap, and Britain and France held it, or so they thought. The illusion of control was about to be shattered. The canal's future would soon be decided, not by empires, but by new forces. Suez was a symbol, but also a target. The world's attention was fixed on this narrow strip of water. The next move would change everything. The canal's fate was no longer certain. Power was shifting. Then came Gamal Abdel Nasser, Egypt's president, a charismatic leader. He had a vision: Egypt for Egyptians. No more foreign domination. Nasser wanted real independence, a new era. He needed money to build the Aswan High Dam, a project for Egypt's future. He asked the West for help. At first promises, then hesitation. Funding pulled. Nasser was furious, betrayed. He looked at the canal running through Egypt, enriching foreigners while Egypt struggled. It felt wrong. He made a decision. On July 26, 1956, Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal Company. The canal now belonged to Egypt. Its revenues would fund the dam. This was about dignity, sovereignty. Nasser became a hero across the Arab world. He dared to challenge the old powers. The West was stunned, outraged. Their precious canal gone. Nasser's move sent shockwaves through Europe. The oil lifeline was now in Egyptian hands. The world watched, breathless. Nasser's boldness inspired millions, but it also provoked fear. The old order was crumbling. Egypt's stand was a turning point. The canal's fate and the world's oil now rested with Nasser. The West faced a new reality. The age of empire was ending. A new era of national power was beginning. Nasser's defiance changed everything. The Suez Canal was now a symbol of independence. The world's oil supply was in the hands of a new master. The stakes had never been higher. The West had to respond. Nasser's stand was a challenge they couldn't ignore. The countdown to crisis had begun. Egypt's bold move would test the world's resolve. The Suez Canal was now the front line. Nasser's gamble would shape history. The world held its breath. The oil lifeline was in play. Nationalization echoed like thunder in London and Paris. This wasn't just about lost profits. It was about oil. The flow of oil, the lifeblood of industry, suddenly at risk. Nasser promised to keep the canal open, to respect international law. Britain and France didn't trust him. To them, he was a dangerous radical. Could one man hold Europe hostage by controlling its oil supply? The thought was terrifying. They saw Nasser's hand on the oil tap and panicked. What if he closed it, used it as a weapon? Their economies would crumble, factories silent, lights out, the post-war recovery reversed. This was more than an insult. It was an existential threat. Oil was power. And power was shifting away from Europe toward Egypt. This could not stand. They had to act, to regain control not just of the canal but of their future. The stakes were too high to accept. A line had been crossed. The world's oil supply was now a weapon. The West faced a crisis. The oil lifeline had snapped, or so it seemed. The response would be swift. The old powers would not give up easily. The Suez Canal was now the center of a global showdown. Oil, power, and pride were all on the line. The world braced for what would come next. The crisis was just beginning. So they plotted in secret. Britain, France, and a new partner, Israel. Israel had its own issues with Nasser. Border clashes, blockades, hostility, a common enemy, a common goal. In October 1956, they met in Sèvres, France. No records, just whispers. The Sèvres Protocol, a secret agreement. Israel would attack Egypt, creating a pretext for war. Then Britain and France would intervene as peacekeepers. Their real aim, occupy the canal zone, take back the canal. It was about oil, securing the flow, putting the tap back in their hands. Nasser had to go. Regime change before it was a buzzword. Military preparations were swift. Troops mobilized, ships set sail, paratroopers ready. A three-pronged attack designed for shock and awe. They believed it would be quick, decisive. Nasser would crumble, the canal would be theirs, the oil would flow, but they underestimated Nasser and the world's reaction. The plan was bold, but risky. The world was watching. The old powers were gambling everything. The Suez Canal was now a battlefield. Oil was the prize. The stakes had never been higher. The secret war for fuel was about to erupt. The countdown to conflict had begun. The world's oil supply hung in the balance. The next move would decide everything. The old order was fighting for survival. The Suez Crisis was about to explode. The world braced for impact. The canal's fate and the world's oil were on the line. The secret was out. The battle for Suez had begun. The world would never be the same. The oil lifeline was at stake. The crisis was now unstoppable. The old powers had made their move. The world watched, waiting for the outcome. The Suez Canal was now the center of the storm. Oil was the reason, and the reward. The invasion began. Israel struck. Britain and France moved in. Bombs fell on Egypt. But then, a surprise. The United States. President Eisenhower was not happy. He hadn't been consulted. He saw old-world colonialism, reckless and dangerous. America had its own interests in the Middle East, oil and influence. The US didn't want chaos or a wider war. It didn't want the Soviets gaining ground. The invasion threatened America's careful game for oil and power. So Uncle Sam said no support. Instead, condemnation, pressure, economic threats. Britain faced a currency crisis. America wouldn't help unless they withdrew. The mighty British Empire humbled. France, too, had to back down. The invasion stalled, failed, a political disaster. The old powers lost big. Their influence in the Middle East shattered, their prestige tarnished. Who gained? America. Its power grew, its influence spread, and the big oil companies. Many American became even more dominant. The crisis showed one thing: oil was king. Oil was the prize. The Suez Crisis was always about the oil. The world's balance of power had shifted. The age of empire was over. America now held the cards. The canal's fate was sealed, not by war, but by power. Oil would keep flowing, but under new masters. The Suez Crisis changed everything. The world's thirst for oil had redrawn the map. The old order was gone. A new era had begun. The lesson was clear: control the oil, control the world. The Suez Canal was no longer just a shortcut. It was the stage for a new world order. The crisis ended, but its impact would last for generations. Oil had rewritten history. The world would never look at the Suez Canal the same way again. The true power was in the flow of oil. The Suez Crisis proved it. The world's future was now liquid, black, and fiercely contested. The canal's story was far from over. The oil age had truly begun. The world would never be the same. Suez was the turning point.